I'm going to introduce our participants. Anshel Pfeffer, senior correspondent at Haaretz newspaper. Anshel, you didn't listen to the explanation. You were on the phone, but they can hear very well. And at The Economist, attorney Orly Erez Lachovsky, the CEO of the Reform Center for Religion and State, Rabbi Shmuel David, the rabbi of the city of Fula, and Alex Riff, the CEO of the 1 Million Lobby. And let's start with the question. The question is always, who's a Jew? But actually, in this panel, I'd like to start with the question, what is Judaism in Israel 2022? So let's start with you, Alex. For me, what's Judaism? Judaism is, first of all, a Judaism that enables all the members of our people to be a part. I was born in the Ukraine. I came here. I made Aliyah at the age of 5. And one of the strongest things I can say about my community, about 1.2 million Russian-speaking Israelis, 1.2 million Russian-speaking Israelis who live here today, is that the state of Israel failed in absorbing them, in integrating them into the Jewish people back in the 1990s. It didn't open the door. We can see this in so many places. We can see this with the 400,000 Russian-speaking Israelis who are not halachically Jewish, that it didn't manage to open to them the gates of conversion in a respectful, frank, and open way. We see those who are Jews like myself. If I get married through the rabbinate, they'll have to explore my Judaism in a very humiliating way just because I came from a community that its religiosity was deleted for an entire 70 years. And the rabbinical view, we can see the way they perceive this community is very, very harsh. So for me, Judaism is first and foremost a home that sees me, that recognize the unique features of the history of the place I came from, that knows how to open the door to my community, that once today we hold survey after survey after survey, and we ask the 1.2 million, are you Jews? 94% answer that they are Jews. 94%. And then we ask them, are they Jews according to the halacha? And then only 74% say that they are. But they don't have another identity. Even if they came here in the 1990s, they are or they aren't halachically Jewish. But today they feel Jewish. And we see it now as part of the law of return, the grandchild section clause. They're talking about this statement that Gentiles are coming. It's like spitting into my community's face. Okay, so we'll get to that later, but you did give an answer. Your answer is Judaism is a home that accepts us. Yes, completely. Orly? A sentence, yes. The 1 Million Lobby is an NGO today. It's the only NGO amongst Russian speakings in Israel who wishes to advance the needs and rights of Russian speaking Jews. We are the generation of children, and we want to improve the situation in so many aspects, language, culture, education, absorption. Orly Erez Lachovsky, you asked what Judaism is. Let me tell you what Judaism is not. It's one extremist, exclusive, one-dimensional, and that's actually the situation in Israel today. And the way we see this incoming government, it's going to be even worse. We in the Reform movement, for many years, we've taken action to show Israelis that there's more than one way to be Jewish in Israel. The majority of the Jewish population does not identify with the Orthodox Haredi form of Judaism, which is the one offered by the chief rabbinate. And for many, many years, we had struggled in order to change this situation, because beyond the fact that it violates rights and it's offensive and humiliating, it also doesn't address the needs of the Israeli population. And Alex mentioned polls, and from all surveys, we see that more and more Israelis are identifying with the Reform and conservative synagogues. I mean, there used to be this saying that the synagogue that most Jews don't go to is the Orthodox one, but that's not the case anymore. Many Israelis want an egalitarian bar mitzvah and bat mitzvah where the mother can stand beside her son, and they want a Judaism that has a more inclusive definition of Judaism and is not against women and LGBT people and Arabs. So tell me what Judaism is, not just what it isn't. It's a place that gives a significant response to those who want to be part of it, to address the needs of the general population, the worldviews. Each one can manifest or realize their Judaism in different ways. There are three main Jewish denominations, and each one should be allowed to express their denomination as they are outside of Israel. And here in Israel, we need to fight the other denominations for any response and place, and that's inconceivable. It definitely is not aligned with a Judaism that believes in multifacetedness. This, a panel is called multiple identities. Well, Judaism needs to believe in multiple identities. I'm going to skip over the rabbi now. He asked me to skip over him. It's not exclusion. Anshil, maybe you can tell us what you think Judaism is, and then we'll get to the rabbi. This affirmative action, let me explain, was intended to give the rabbi who's in a minority opinion the ability to respond to everyone. I don't think that there's anyone here who has a minority opinion on this topic, because your question also is the answer. What is Judaism in Israel, or what is Judaism in general? And the question mark is actually the answer we've had here in Israel. We still have, and hopefully we will continue to have in the future, even though, like the previous speakers have said, things aren't looking very well in this respect. But hopefully we will continue to have in the future this space, this sphere in which this question is a legitimate one, where we can ask what Judaism is, and the answer doesn't have to come with an exclamation mark or period. For some people, it could be religion. It could be one of the denominations mentioned by Orly. It could be this home that takes in all these people, like Alex just described, in a very interesting way. The question mark regarding them, some people, place a question mark about them, and there aren't any there we I have no problem with a question mark. Even those who claim we are the original authentic Judaism, we need to place a question mark on that as well, because there is no original authentic Jews. Even those who claim to be authentic and original, they're merely yet another modern evolution. The Haredi Jews always claim to be the authentic Jews. They're more modern. The Reform movement, and I'm not saying this in order to exclude the Haredi Jews, the Orthodox Jews, because that was exactly your question. We shouldn't exclude anyone. What we need is to give room for all these questions and for a broad variety of answers. And that is Judaism in Israel, and hopefully it will continue to be such, where we have this space. I mean, these are not denominations, they're also denominations, but the greatest one is Israelis who don't get up in the morning and say, I'm this or I'm that. Most Israelis, they get up in the morning and they live here as citizens. 79% of them are Jews, and they live in a country that speaks Hebrew, and that their holidays, that's the Jewish calendar, and they don't necessarily need to put this badge on themselves. I'm like this, I'm Jewish according to the halacha, I'm Jewish according to my culture. Your question, I think, is the actual answer there in that space that we've created, and hopefully we will continue to create. That is Judaism, and it doesn't have just one definition, and it shouldn't have only one definition. Rabbi Shmuel David. First of all, hello everyone, and I'm delighted to hear the diverse opinions. For me, there's only one form of Judaism, and that's Orthodox Judaism. I think that Reform Judaism is fake. Haredi, ultra-Orthodox Judaism, that's also fake. There is no such thing as secular Judaism. We have secular Jews who don't, perform the mitzvahs. But what the previous speakers have said, this reminds me of an argument or discussion I had 40 years ago, and it was in the military, that was a friendly discussion. And he said he doesn't believe in God because God is X, Y, Z. And I said, you know what? In that God, I don't believe in him as well. I mean, you're depicting God in a certain way. And the God that you've just depicted, I also don't believe in him. So I guess I represent the rabbinate, but I don't represent the rabbinate the way that you or all Israelis perceive as this Judaism, or the rabbinate, which is exclusive, which excludes groups. everything you just brought up, Reform Jews, LGBTQ, and Olim from the former Soviet Union, I do not experience, and you can ask people in Afula, they do not experience what you do. I'm not saying that it's incorrect, but my Judaism is Orthodox Judaism, but this Judaism can include and provide a legal response, which is important to me. I mean, I don't think that a couple, because for whatever reason, shouldn't receive the rights they deserve, even if I can't or don't want to marry in a religious ceremony, a halachic ceremony. Once they're a couple, whether they're gay or same-sex marriage or not same-sex, two genders, but they need to get their rights. That's my Judaism. That's what I think needs to be done, and I'll get to that later. But Judaism is Orthodox Judaism. Judaism just knows how to include the Reform denomination, which I don't consider to be Judaism or authentic Judaism. It's fake, it's phony, like I said. I mean, I know that I'm hurting you, that I'm being painful, but you just need to understand my view. For me, Judaism is only Orthodox Judaism, but for me, Judaism ultimately means that I'm not preventing rights from anyone who deserves these rights. Yes, I think that every couple deserves rights. Let's not call it marriage, because marriage is a religious term, but yes, if they do have some kind of a covenant, a relationship, a common law marriage, if there's a reforms synagogue, I'm saying something, and I know people will be from my community will be angry with me for that. Yes, they deserve rights. If an Orthodox synagogue receives 100 shekels, then they should also receive 100 shekels, because this synagogue serves as a spiritual center of some sorts. Then they deserve the rights. They receive the budget just like an Orthodox synagogue deserves. As a Jew, definitely not as a Democrat, I should not create or be responsible for any injustice, because I consider it to be injustice. So if I'll summarize your answers, you each said, first of all, what Judaism is what I think it is, or to be more accurate, Judaism is this multiplicity of identities. How is Israel dealing with this multiplicity of identities? The answer is Judaism is a multiplicity of identities, and I'm really surprised that none of you answered. I think it's one of the two classic definitions of Judaism, that it's either a religion or a nationality. It's quite interesting how nobody, I mean, what is Judaism? Judaism is my nationality. It's a Jewish nationality. We can look at it from the outside. Anshel said that, yeah. Actually, he addressed the religious aspect. Let's keep that as a question mark. But now I'd like to address the elephant in the room, or the elephant that's not in the room, to be more accurate, because with all due respect to Rav Shmuel, who agreed to sit with us as the representatives of Orthodoxy, in the Orthodox map, there is the certain liberal tone, and no Haredi, no ultra-Orthodox representative wasn't even willing to participate in a discussion that Orly was participating in, which is about multiple identities. Now, this empty seat, this empty chair of a Haredi representative is very significant, because for many who are not Haredim, for them, Haredism is one of the main torchbearers of Judaism. The Jewish torch. And my question is, can we hold this discussion without the presence of the Haredi representative? Look, we are maintaining this discussion because we're Jews, and we are maintaining a discussion. That's the essence of Judaism. The further back we go in history and in Jewish history and mythology, because history becomes a bit blurred at a certain stage, and then facts and traditions are less clear. But there's one thing that's always been clear, and that's the discussion. But this discussion wasn't always held in a good way, and there were times, and unfortunately this period is beginning to remind us of such a past period in which the denominations that we then had in Judaism didn't get along very well, and we see where what that led to in various times, especially remember what that led to 2,000 years ago. So this discussion was held here, and sometimes it was on a nicer tone, sometimes on not such a nice tone. You're talking about a nation or nationality and religion. There's an evolution here. We're talking here about multiple identities in the Jewish people, but you have even more Jews who live outside of Israel, and they also have these question marks. Where's the emphasis on nationality, religion, culture, identity? Some people are trying to say that this is that we're talking about the Jewish DNA. I think that's a problematic and racist concept, but it's out there, and I mean nobody can decide. Nobody has authorized or empowered the state of Israel as much as we love the state of Israel, but nobody gave it the power to determine on this question. We're such a small dot on this continuum of Jewish discussion that it's something that we're going to continue discuss. Our children and grandchildren will continue to discuss both here and in the diaspora. May I? It's not that, okay, we're going to decide here what is Judaism. Okay, I'd like to ask you, Orly, because you earlier mentioned the synagogue, which people don't go to, that's the Orthodox synagogue, and maybe the Haredi representative can afford not participating in this discussion because he won, because it's true that the Haredim are a minority in Israel, but the secular are Orthodox secular. The synagogue they don't go to is the Orthodox, and they get married in the Orthodoxy or in funerals, because when people die, when people pass away, ultimately the choice we can discuss whether it's a choice of most Israeli Jews is to have an Orthodox burial. Okay, let me disagree. Let's first of all say that just like Anshel said, there have always been disagreements amongst the Jews. What never existed until the establishment of the State of Israel a few decades ago is to take one denomination, the extreme denomination, the Haredi one, and turn it into the state's official religion in a way that excludes everybody else. And the fact that the State of Israel adopted this denomination and offers to all Jews at any point in time the Orthodox option as the only one, or which the one that has preference above all the others, is inconceivable both in a democratic nor Jewish state. Look, historically, whenever the Jews had a state, they did have an official religion. I think that right now, but the last time Jews had a country, the religion of the state wasn't the Orthodox religion. It was that of the priests and the Prushim, and they were kind of marginalized. You know what? Let's go back to our day and age, when the state invests huge budgets into Orthodox Haredi Judaism in all contexts. Even the Kotel, the Wailing Wall, you have the Foundation for the Legacy of the Kotel, which receives millions of shekels every year, and the synagogues and the Haredi school system, and then they say that the Israelis, follow the Orthodoxy, but what Israelis know that there's inconceivable competition here. You direct all budgets in one direction, and then you say, now compete and let's see who's win. I'd like to say that in contrast to the Haredim, we are not saying, oh, it's just us, we're the best and all the others should be rejected. I'm saying, no, everybody needs to be budgeted equally, but then you're in an inferior position. No, I disagree. I can tell you that with respect to education for Judaism in state schools, do Israelis know that most of the money transferred by the Ministry of Finance to organizations that teach Judaism in the secular school system, they transfer the funds to the Orthodox groups? When my son had to be bar mitzvahed and they wanted the experience in school, they took them to an Orthodox synagogue. The question is, what's the chicken and the egg? It's by no choice that's the mainstream. Look at the Jewish world outside of Israel. The non-Orthodox world is thriving. The conservative and reform communities are thriving. Okay. So yes, well, I'll be moderator of this panel, sir. The non-Orthodox denomination. How can the state of Israel? How does it? The topic is, how does the state of Israel contend with multiple identities? We're talking about both the Jewish people and the state of Israel. Let me just correct you. This is not something that is something that it's doomed to happen. More and more Israelis don't see Orthodoxy as their home. More of them are concerned with radicalization, with the way they treat women. You see the buds of feminism not just in the Orthodoxy, in the Haredi community as well, and the treatment to LGBTQ communities and the treatment to non-Jews. I think many Israelis simply take issue with this kind of Judaism that unfortunately receives preference in Israel even today. Now I'd like to ask you, Rabbi, and let's look at the Jewish world, because in Israel, indeed, you have a certain advantage. There is an Orthodox hegemony. Doesn't matter if this is what the people wanted or they somehow managed it to, in a conniving way, to get it. But if we look at Jews in the world, Orthodoxy is a minority. First of all, that's not true. If anybody who looks at what's happening in American Jewry, Reform Judaism is disappearing. Maybe not most. I shouldn't. It's not correct to say most, but a high percentage of the partners all over the U.S. are non-Jews. I mean, they are sons of a non-Jewish mother. It's true. There's a halachic definition, and they are forcefully bringing them in. I'm sorry about using such strong language into Judaism. They don't consider themselves, most of them don't consider themselves to be Jews, and they definitely don't see themselves committed. The support of Reformed Jews for Israel is on a very low percentages. I don't want to say that it's non-existent. Okay, but hold on. Okay, we can disagree. We can disagree. It's not that relevant support for Israel, yes or no? Sorry, Orly, I'm sorry you're not talking to the mic. We can't hear you. I just said that there is explicit commitment of the reform movement to Zionism, so that's not exactly accurate. This discussion is interesting because the legitimacy within the Jewish world is identifying with the state of Israel. That's also a statement. No, I just answered a question. I'm asking, perhaps it's not that dominant amongst world Jewry as it is in Israel. Yes, I completely agree. And regardless of that, even if here it's a small minority and they have nothing outside of Israel, I'm not saying that that's the case. I'm just saying that my Jewish and democratic view says that we shouldn't exclude. I am a great believer in dialogue. To tell you that it's worth something, I can reach an agreement now with Ms. Orly, but tomorrow morning, the person to my right and the person to her left, we can both reach an agreement that you'll get a certain section at the Kotel. And tomorrow somebody will say, I won't accept that. And somebody on her left will say, why did you agree to that? We wouldn't agree to that. And you know how I see Judaism? As dialogue and agreement and acceptance of equal terms. It's not the exclusion of reforms or Jews who came from the Soviet Union. And I don't think it's humiliating this ceremony. I was in the Batei Din with Jews from Russia, but it doesn't matter. I think that through dialogue, Alex, when Alex said that there's something uncomfortable for me as a Jew, as a rabbi who belongs to the rabbinate, I want to hear her out. And don't want to put an end to my conversation with her. I'd like to ask her what bothers you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and there are probably more than 5 things that bother her. And I want to help her not because I have to, but because in my Judaism, what I am committed to is preventing injustice. My Judaism is all about preventing injustice, and whether it's injustice to Reform Jews or to all kinds of Jews or to Gentiles, I want to fix that. You talked about non-exclusion, but when you talked about Reform Judaism, you said some of them are not Jews because they weren't born to a Jewish mother. Alex, you insisted on that difference earlier between the people from former Soviet Union who define themselves as Jews and those who are halachically Jewish. When you hear that comment, how do you feel? Look, sir, look, Rabbi, what's amazing, the amazing piece of data is that for another research that we conducted, out of those 400,000, people have said, they've been here for 30 years. Judaism shut the door in their face. So the Judaism, they don't really care. 94% of them in general say that they're Jews, but still 45% of the young generation, ages 18 to 45, say that they will want to go through an Orthodox conversion process. If changes are introduced into the process, 45% they will want to go through an Orthodox process if there will be some changes. What are the changes? Not to cancel Judaism and mitzvahs, but a more respectful process. And this is not what I said. This really rattles you to the core, your identity to the core. The people who go through these processes are our children. They are more Israeli, more Jewish than I am, and suddenly somebody puts them to the test. It's such a difficult experience. Let me give you an example. There's something very Jewish that, when you go through the conversion process, you don't pass it the first time. They say, prove to me that you want it enough. Come back in 3 months. Say, oh, it sounds very lovely to learn more. But for a Russian-speaking Israeli, it's like he failed the test. And you maybe were laughing, and you got a 99 and not 100, but it really shakes them to the core of their being. They're humiliated. They didn't know from the outset that there will be a next second opportunity. I'm talking about those who really want that, and now it's like a slap in their face. These people often don't come back just because of this humiliation, and that happens in Judaism exploration. I hear these stories asking to bring the mother or the grandmother to speak in Yiddish. One person had to bring his demented grandma, and they asked her what she had for breakfast on Yom Kippur. So humiliating, so terrible, and it's just us because we came from a country that had no religious. So these are our unique features. So what am I trying to say here? I'm just saying we need to see how we open the door. We need to see how these unique characteristics. You started the story with a religion and nationality. The people from the FSU are classic. They came from a country that had no religion, but their nationality was Jewish. It was written in our ID card, Jewish. It doesn't matter how much we try to assimilate. Now everybody needs to applaud now for Alex because they just applauded in the other panel. They're certain that something is happening here. Sorry about that. So I'm saying we still have a lot to learn. The Soviet Union Jewry survived by miracle. They banned any form of religion for 70 years, and they kept their Judaism and came to Israel, and yet they didn't open the door to them. They didn't understand their characteristics. One last comment. You talk about meetings. I'm often in panels where rabbis do attend, but I've noticed that there's this tendency to various senior, serious rabbis. They finish talking, and then they go and teach a Torah lesson. So if you're constantly talking, saying whatever you have to say, and then go to teach Torah, then you never stick around long enough to hear me, to hear what I have to say, to talk to me. Well, I agree with you. That's first and foremost dialogue and getting to know each other, and I'm certain that we can find solutions together. Let me just say that I have tears in my eyes. What from the fact that you're talking about this suffering, this pain? It's terrible. Does anybody know Rabbi David Basel? It'll never happen with him. He's one of the conversion dayanim. It'll never happen with him. Look, I've been a teacher at Nativ for 15 years. There was this couple of that converted yesterday. That the person in Haifa told me open up a Beit Din in Afula because they're too harsh in Haifa. So everybody will go to Afula, and they told me with tears in their eyes how they rejected them because of some tiny nonsense, and it's something that I experienced. I didn't know to what extent. Let's go back to the conversion process. Why did that not happen? Look, I have tears. I have tears in my eyes from that painful description. This is why I said I do want to continue our conversation later, because the way in which the rabbinate is currently being presented in Israel, yes, it's correct, it's true, and it pains me because the rabbinate I know and I can represent stays in Afula and in some other places, and it hurts me. It pains me. We'll soon go to politics, but a question for you, Orly. It's as if the reform movement is offering a different conversion, and it was very interesting to hear from Alex that 45% said that they want Orthodox conversion. I mean, your door is open. Look, let me tell you that there's a significant increase in the number of conversions, and I have to say, with all due respect to Orthodox conversion, even the moderate Orthodox conversion, we're the ones who paid the way for its recognition, just like in other contexts. They recognize the reform movement for purposes of conversion and of funding for rabbis, and the moderate orthodoxy followed in our footsteps. But Orthodox conversion requires certain things. I don't know if people know that, but if parents want to convert their children, the children have to study at the religious schools. So this is why there's no doubt that Orthodox, even moderate Orthodox conversion is not enough for so many people who want to go through conversion, and this is why they come to the reform and conservative conversion processes that are very long. It's a year-long process, and the interesting thing is maybe you can present some numbers, but we don't see people flocking to reform conversion. We can still see that those who are quote unquote rejected, or that Orthodox Judaism doubts their Judaism, they still want to be converted. They're not all of them. Last year, 2021, the Supreme Court recognized reform and conservative conversions for the purposes of the law of return. Could you give me the number of conversions in Israel? We're talking about hundreds a year. As far as the data, there's a drop in the number of people who are converted through the state religious institutions. And think about the budgets. We hardly get anything. We're definitely an alternative, and conversion today is recognized for every intent and purposes except for personal status. Alex, those who are converted through the reform movement still can't get married in Israel. What have we done by that? You still don't have equal rights. You still can't get married in Israel. Let me say, I agree with you about the marriage. This is something that came up, but there are some halachic solutions for that: to study in the morning in a regular secular school, and to a special religious school in the afternoon. And they're acting against themselves, the rabbinate, because I know people who couldn't prove their Judaism, and they went to reform jury, and they said, we can't convert you, you're already Jewish, but here, fine, take our stamp of approval. And your numbers are going to grow, because if the rabbinate will continue, then there will be no other solution. Let me just say about marriage, and more and more Israelis are getting married outside of the rabbinate, because regardless of the question of conversion. But it's important to say about conversion that it's going to be a significant crisis, irreversible rift with diaspora Jewry if this will all pass. The grandchild clause. I have a revolutionary suggestion. Let's forgo conversion. It didn't exist originally in Judaism. These are things that were introduced not through authentic Judaism. There's a beautiful midrash about Abraham, but look, I've had several experiences where Alex was born. I had visited that place over the past year, and it's not easy to cover a war. And I was in the Ukraine over the past year, and I go to Ukraine. I've been going to Ukraine a lot as a journalist for 20 years now. In recent years, Israel and Jews are very, very popular there. People talk about anti-Semitism, but things have really changed there for the better. When I was in the Ukraine 2 or 3 years ago with Netanyahu, there were two countries in the world that had a Jewish prime minister and president. That was Israel and the Ukraine. That's true. I used to go to places like the Ukraine and show my British passport. I wouldn't always show that I'm Jewish or Israeli. Today, wherever I go, they accept you as an Israeli. And the most interesting thing is the amount of people, not just in Kiev and Odessa, which are places where Jews had always lived, but you get to the most remote places, and people identify as Jews. And I say, wow, really? So this dialogue almost always repeats itself. How do you know that you're a Jew? What do you mean? Because they beat me up at school. The power that people needed, the strength, in order to just maintain the idea that they're Jews for years of, Nazi annihilation, and then in generations of Bolshevik and Soviet persecution, and persecution of Ukrainian nationalism. Anybody who ever dominated that place over the past 100 years wanted to annihilate Jews, whether physically or spiritually, and these people held on to that. So how do we get off? I mean, to say, oh, but your mother was, not exactly Jewish halachically. We I mean, we all have stories about our grandparents. We live our lives, and our parents live such an easy life, and the power these people had to have in order to maintain their Jewish identity. And even the native course, with all due respect, my daughter was a soldier at the educational corps in the military. She was a commander of courses to school and for military preparation. And in every course she commanded, there was always a point that she had to inform her soldiers who was entitled to a native course. She had to inform her soldiers who were drafted to the IDF. Most of them were new immigrants, Olot. They knew that they were being drafted to the IDF as Jewish soldiers in the state of Israel, and she had to tell them, you know what? Now the military is offering this course for you because actually you're not Jewish. Some of them, didn't know that. It was inconceivable for them. And what right do we have to clarify their identity? Judaism is much stronger than any group of 6 old men who say you passed the test. What right? How dare you humiliate Jews who risk their lives to be Jews? That's what I have to say about conversion. We need to cancel conversion to Judaism. And Alex said, let's talk about the law of return. Let's talk about it. I spent the entire day yesterday in the Knesset for the swearing in. I looked around me, and it's amazing to see the power drifting from one side to another. And I was asking myself, will this ever be reversed, or that's it? Has demography spoken? And Alex, you are the CEO of the lobby of the 1 million. You're talking about 1.2 million. That's more or less the number of Haredi Jews in Israeli society. And here I'd like to quote our colleague Chaim Levinson from Haaretz, and he wrote about the fact that Netanyahu chose the Haredim while giving up on the Russian sector. He said the Russian sector is going to the cemetery while the Haredi sector is going to OBGYN wards and having more and more babies. Do you think this is it, or is there some way to change this? I don't know exactly where the question hid there, but I'll try and answer. Look, I think that this situation with the Russians in Israel, it's not that they're going to the graveyards. They are beginning to vote more and more like Israelis. I'm generation 1.5. I was born in the Soviet Union, but the children's generation, their vote is similar to the vote in the Israeli generation. My parents' generation, they're voting to the Likud, to Yesh Atid, and to Israel Beitenu. These are the 3 large parties, but we held a survey before the elections, and we saw something new, that almost 13% of the children vote to the religious Zionism. So what's happening in the rest of the Israeli society is happening in the Russian sector. So I think that this is all about identity. What are we talking about here? About canceling the grandchild clause. Just like Anshil said, grandchildren of Jews, that's it. The door is being closed in their face. And there are various Knesset members, Kari and others, who are saying that Goyim are coming here, Gentiles, and the Gentiles are coming here that have nothing to do with the state of Israel. And it's the same expressions they used against us in the 1990s. The Gentiles, the people coming here are Gentiles, Nazis. There were groups of neo-Nazis in the 1990s. Yeah, it's true. But then it taints this entire immigration wave. And now they're saying it's an immigration of Gentiles. 55,000 people who have come here because of the law of return since February. 55,000 from Ukraine, Russia, and Russia. Usually, on average, we have 20,000 Olim from all over the world, and now 55,000 from these countries. And now, what the country is saying, the grandchildren, you need to close the door. We don't have the data yet, but we've asked out of these 55,000 how many are entitled according to this clause. But it'll change the demography of Israel. What does it mean for those of us who already live here? That's us. This law, that thanks to this law, you're here. 94%, 30% are not halachically Jewish, but they feel Jews. We're saying to them, this loophole that existed, and thanks to that you came here, we've closed it shut. That's it. You no longer belong. They don't feel like they belong. They can't get married in Israel, and now we're closing this loophole. Relatives of people can't come. We have people of first proximity, and there are refugees who are not entitled to live here under the law of return. 20,000 refugees who have relatives here. They came to be with their families, and it's a resounding slap in the face to say that they're Gentiles. That's a lie, because after 10 and 20 years they all feel part of the Jewish people. They are a part of the Jewish people, and instead of understanding the gravity of the mistake, and that's what we talked about, the gravity, the mistake of the rabbinate to open the doors to them, we're adding insult to injustice by shutting the door to the Jewish people. That means that we are ceasing to be the state of the Jewish people. We're no longer the place where Jews flee to in times of crisis, of trouble, and that's a horrible thing. Yes, let's hear from the representative of the Orthodoxy. Let's add another angle to this. It's important to say that it's very relevant to former members of the FSU. It's also true for those who come from liberal countries, like the rabbi said in a negative way. American Jewry, many define themselves as Jews, and they're part of Jewish community. They live Jewish lives, and the annulment of the grandchild clause will harm 3 million Jews, 2 million of them from North America. We must understand, you're talking about halachic Jews? No, they're not halachically Jewish. Their father, by self-definition, their self-identity, and most of the majority of the Jewish people sees them as Jews, both in FSU and in North America. For many years, actually, Netanyahu stopped these various attempts because he understood the importance of the relations between Israel and Jewish diaspora, and most of Jews in Israel support a strong relationship with the Jewish diaspora, because this severance will turn this country to the country of the Jewish religion, but not of the Jewish people. The right to respond. It's so difficult to be constantly attacked as the representative of the rabbinate. When I said that some of them are not Jewish, that some of the Reform Jews, some of the people, I don't want to offend anyone, that they have nothing to do with Judaism, they don't go to synagogue, but once again, maybe we can disagree on the data, whether it's 10, 15, or 20%. I don't have data, but I do have knowledge. I don't conduct polls and surveys. The data doesn't support that. There are 1,000 communities in North America where 1.5 million Jews live. And do they pay membership fees to synagogues? Yes, they pay membership fees to the Reform movement. How many times a year do they go to synagogue? Once a year or every week? No, but we're not measuring people's religiosity. So a Jew who doesn't go to synagogue, that's one thing. But somebody who's a non-Jew and does, the children don't feel Jewish and don't go to Jewish schools. No, they have Jewish education and they celebrate the Jewish holidays. If they do have Jewish education, then okay, fine. I have nothing to say. I hear things. And it's not from rabbis. I read newspapers. I live in Israel, of course, but I'm saying once again, it's true that the rabbinate is shooting its own feet, as you're constantly saying, and it's not even its feet that it's shooting, it's even its stomach. So I'm saying that I'm completely against this view. I'm against annulling or canceling conversion, but the conversion should be much more friendly, because we're talking about people who considered themselves Jews, who lived as Jews, who identify as Jews in some difficult times, that they were called Jid in the street and they threw stones at them, etc. And here it's like you're a Gentile. And even if I think that halachically, so you object to the cancellation of the grandchild clause, you are in favor of the clause or in favor of canceling the clause? I'm completely Orthodox and I'm in favor. You're in favor of the clause or canceling? I think that the current grandchild clause should be canceled. I'm telling you the truth. But I think that everything should be done with so much dialogue and understanding. Maybe we can cancel it partially or completely. For 92 years it's existed, and the Jewish nature since 52 years, since 1970. And to change it now, look, now we are arguing. Look, I think that if we sit with you or with you, it doesn't matter, even with two of you, okay? I'm not excluding anyone, God forbid. And we look at the data. Forget about American Jewry. The data that I know, we have over 10,000 Olim who come from Russia, from the FSU. Why do you want to set aside American Jewry? That's half the Jewish people. Uh, no, no, no. When I said set them aside, I said only for the purposes of this discussion, not completely. Not me. In Afula, there are over 10,000 Olim from the former Soviet Union. I try to take care of them as much as I can. And there's a reason why that couple came to me yesterday, the couple I told you about earlier. Every Friday night at the Shabbat meal, exactly for the reason why you said not to cancel, because many, and you could say that 94% consider themselves Jews, but the question is what exactly, how do they see themselves Judaism? How are they involved in Judaism? If his father is Jew, then if only the grandfather is Jewish and only the grandfather on one side. This is why I said we need to make distinctions on different kind of grandchildren, and I don't wish to completely cancel this. I would just want to see to what extent, I mean, there is one Jewish state, and the way I perceive it, a Jew is an Orthodox Jew, halachically Jewish, and you know, as I bring in non-Jews to Israel, it means also people coming from Eritrea infiltrating into Israel, a lot of guest workers who get married here in Israel, and it's other Jews, and that's most non-Jews from this former Soviet Union. They do marry Jews, but they themselves are not Jews, so this won't be a Jewish country anymore. And for these two reasons, I am arguing with the conversion tribunals, and they're the ones who get to decide. I can only recommend and to say you could, according this section or not, to make the conversion more lenient. But I think we need to recognize conversion because I want everyone to be halachically Jewish, even if it's not the halacha of 100% of all those who rule on the halacha. And I truly identify with what Anshil, I don't want to get your name wrong, I'm sorry. These are Jews who have always considered themselves Jews, and they were persecuted as Jews and beaten up as Jews, and today to call them Gentiles. I don't want to use this word, but I think that it's important how we do this correctly without harming all the things that you've mentioned. And this is why I said it's so important for me to sit with you. I have something very interesting to say. I don't know if people know that the nation state law, I have a lot of criticism over this law. It talks about the fact that Israel is the national homeland for the Jewish people. And by the way, it's important to say something about the grandchild clause, and it has to do with your first question. It's very important. Orly said, and she's right, the grandchild clause has been around for 52 years, the law of return for 72 years. Why did they change the law of return? Why did they add that grandchild clause? According to the original law, a Jew is entitled to make aliyah to Israel, and that's it. There was no definition of who is a Jew. It was very clear in 1955 that 2 years after the establishment of the State of Israel, that a Jew is entitled to make aliyah, no questions about it. And they even passed this law on the day, of Herzl's passing, because there were things that were clear. Some people are Jews, and we know that they're Jews, and we're not going to check and scrutinize them. But what happened? The State of Israel was established, then there was a Knesset and parties, and there were politicians from a certain sector who said no. And that's why the government said in 1970, in order to leave room for this discussion, they added the grandchild clause. There's this like legend. They said, first of all, let's give them their space. Let's not hold this arguments. We're Jews, of course we're going to continue and argue, but the law of return, you know what? Let me follow this line of thought. But let's not argue about it. Let's say even the grandchild, let's expand so that we won't get into these disagreements. But 52 years have passed, and for the first time in the history of the State of Israel, we have a coalition with a religious majority, right? In this new coalition, the secular Jews are a minority, and when we talk about multiple identities in the Jewish people, perhaps the answer was given in the ballot box. Why a majority of religious? Is the Likud party a religious party? It's not a majority, but count out of 64 Knesset members of the coalition, how many define themselves as religious, what, from the Likud as well, then you'll get to coalition. You're right, the majority, that was the majority. The majority are religious Jews, and now you're taking a law. It's not just a law, it's a law that was passed without objection back in 1950. In 1950 it was passed, and now you're changing it. Such a significant change. That's that very narrow way to treat it. Just because they wanted to stop the aliyah. Let me emphasize a certain point. Look, we've been talking about this for years. Smotrich talks about it. Look, this isn't the point. The point is that in 1948, there was 100% because things were very difficult in Israel. But since 1970, 1980, people come here, people make aliyah because things are good here. And things in Israel were much better than in DP camps. There were 2 million Jews in the DP camps in Europe, and things were much better in Israel. So people always made aliyah out of a need. 98% of the people who make aliyah don't come here because they're such avid Zionists. The fact is, we don't have a lot of American Jews. My parents are very strange people. They came from the West. They lowered their quality of life in order to live in Israel. I still don't understand why they do that. Israel is a place of refuge for Jews. It's not a paradise for Jews. It's never been. And to come from a DP camp from a demolished Europe in 1948, which is the first 1 million Jews who came to Israel, they didn't come here out of Zionism. There's no difference between Aliyah coming today and the Aliyah in the 1990s. You can applaud him, and now you can boo him. Kidding. So no, we can still develop this conversation. You can exchange phone numbers. We have 3 minutes left. I saw that some people wanted to ask questions. Let's be brief and make sure that it's, a question and not a comment. Okay, who'd like to answer this question? In Hebrew or in English? In Hebrew. We have mainly Hebrew speakers here. Look, Israel shouldn't be the state of the religious people. It is the country of the Jewish nation, and as such, a Jewish religion has a significant place. What I would like to say is that the extremist government that's about to be formed here is going to make life much more difficult for the liberal Jews in the U.S. and is going to give a lot of weapons to those who call to boycott Israel. Maybe the answer lies in the question we asked at the beginning, whether Judaism is a religion or a nationality. I think it's both, but what is it first? This country is defined as the country of the Jewish people. The Jewish people on all its different colors, religions, and denominations. Undoubtedly, the current situation is both harming Israelis and also many Jews outside of Israel. If we're talking about multiple identities, we must hope that this government will not demolish the small achievements we have for Jewish pluralism and for hearing diverse voices, and at least for the Prime Minister to understand what's at stake here. And some very important interests and rights are at stake here. I feel like we've been cut off in the middle, but we need to wrap up. But we'll maybe sometime we'll continue this discussion. Let's start with you, Anshel. I have no doubt that we will no longer be alive, but our great grandchildren and their great children will be sitting either here or elsewhere and continue this conversation. And they won't all be Orthodox, and they won't all be Haredi, and they won't all be Reform. I don't know what there'll be, but Jewish history has proven that whenever it's been said, oh, this worldview is about to disappear and another will be the majority, it never happened in the same way that the demographers calculated. And on this discussion on who's a Jew and what's Judaism will continue as it has been going on for thousands of years. And we're going to have a ball. Yes. First of all, I'm very happy to agree with him, but my concluding sentence, I would like to say for the umpteenth time that I'm all in favor of dialogue and conversation because there's alienation. I'm not familiar enough. I don't get to know her opinions well enough in a 1 hour discussion, and she doesn't get to know mine. And then there's alienation. Oh, you're a Haredi, you're Orthodox, you're this, you're that. But in a genuine, sincere conversation, you can reduce their arguments and disagreements will remain. I'm If you're in favor of this clause or against it, yes, we will continue to have disagreements. The arguments will continue, but dialogue will lead to a much lower level of alienation, a much greater understanding. And excuse me for saying that, for love, because I want to love people, even if they're different than me. And I argue with them out of love, not out of hatred. And I think that that's Judaism and that's democracy. I think that we are at a junction with the formation of this new government that seems to be taking place, a junction which is critical for the future of the Jewish people. And ultimately, I hope that the far-fetched and extremist demands, the ones we've mentioned about conversions and law of return, but also the demands related to the restrict the harm to Israeli democracy, to the Supreme Court, the rights of women of non-Orthodox movements, and the rights of Arabs in Israel. Hopefully, all that won't happen, and I do hope and believe that the Israelis will take to the streets and won't come to terms with such a radical view. And it's important to remind us that half of the Israeli population do not support these extremist opinions, and we are going to continue and act for a Jewish and democratic state the way those who formulated the Declaration of Independence worded it. Alex, one last comment. I'd like to finish on an optimistic note. I think that the reason why we decided to start this lobby as an NGO and not to join the Knesset is exactly for such a moment. Today we can be non-affiliated with any side. I think that if there's anyone that can change things with this upcoming government, that's us. We're already having a series of meetings, extensive meetings with the new members of Knesset and new members of government, because we believe that we can work with them as well. So thank you very much, everyone. I thought that maybe everybody will boo at the end instead of applauding, but never mind. That was just a joke. Thank you very much.